Welcome back. This is Fady from Heartbeat Productions, and today I want to talk to you guys about Patchbays. And my current setup was Patchbays. When I first got into Patchbays, I remember I had to meet with one of my friends, and it was so complicated. I was like, I don't understand it. And this was many years ago. I'm like, where does the ins goes? Where does the outs go? And it was like way over my head at the beginning, and it took me a while to get familiar with it. Then we use just the straight old school analog patch bays and with the patch cables, and you have this whole sheet that you remember how you patch your session and all that kind of stuff, which is still great and it still works, and majority of studios out there are using it. Until a few years ago, I ran across the Flock Audio patch bay. And for me, it was the game changer. So I want to talk to you guys about this a little bit and about how I'm using it with my setup. And as you guys can see, I have a lot of analog gear in the studio on my desk over here and on my rack units over here. I also use my setup for mixing, mastering, and recording, and I want to be able to tap into all my equipments for all of these. You could obviously easily get away without using any patch bay by just grabbing your line out of your interface, go line in into one of those units, but then you're stuck with that how it is, and then you can't just move it around easy. You have to climb back behind the desk and unplug it and plug it again where it used to be, or you want to change the signal path or whatever you want to use it for. It's a lot more work at that point. The Flock Audio Patch Bay, it's a purely analog unit. It takes, so there's three models. The one I have is the 64 channels, is 32 in, 32 out. And it takes DB25 in the back. It's only DB25 cables, so each one carries 8 channels. And then it takes 32 in off that and 32 out of that as well. The amazing thing about it is the app, the computer app that let you change your signal path and routing and split audio. And I'll show you guys here in just a minute. How do I use it? How do I set it up? It's absolutely a game changer for you as a studio if you're starting to tap into analog gear and you want to utilize that for recording, mixing, or mastering as well. All right, let's dig in here. So this is the Patchbay app, and you guys can see it here. You'll see a lot of names on the left, and this is basically how I labeled my stuff. I can go into hardware, and then in my hardware, I'm typing in here on my inputs and the outputs of the back of my patch bay, what did I input and output. So in this scenario, as you guys can see, the input is coming as the insert out of my 4710D, and then on the first two channels, and then the output is the in of those, so just kind of like the round trip. Here's my warm audio 2A. I have two of them, so I named them L and R, left and right. So I have warm audio 2A, left and right. So you can just basically label here all your inputs and outputs however you want it, or what makes sense to you. You can also, which is really cool, pair them. So then they show as a stereo pair or two mono pairs, two mono units on the console, which is really cool. And then that lock button basically keeps the writing the same as an input and output. So like what I have it here for my, if you're going into a unit like a compressor, which you're gonna go through it in and out, so then you can lock it, and then so that way that unit shows as one tab in the plugin, and you don't have to route to the out and back to the in, or to the in back to the out. So that's kind of what these are for. And then here it's allowing 48. Phantom power. I don't use phantom power with my patch bay at all because I don't plug a mic straight to the patch bay. This is one of the things that so many people have complained about. Basically they said, hey, we tried to use this and we got a lot of floor noise, and we just got a lot of noise, and did you not notice that noise? Do you not like it? So here's what I've learned. Do not plug an instrument direct to the patch bay, or do not plug a microphone direct to the patch bay either. When I've done this, I ended up with very low gain, and then I had to crank my gain, even if I'm taking that patch bay. So I have a mic going to the Flock Audio, and then from the Flock Audio goes to my preamp, my 610. I had to crank my 610 to get some form of a gain. And then I had also that brought a lot of the floor noise along with it. So what I do is all my pre's, I go straight from my snake to my pre's, or even just plug it straight to the back of them. Whether I'm recording a microphone, so the mic will go straight into my preamp first. If I'm recording like a synth bass or something, or analog synth that I'm using, I'll go from these to the instrument in, or the high Z input on the front of my interface, or my front of my 4710 or my 1073s. Pre's, I'll just go straight to those, and the line outputs from those is what goes to my Patchbay. Do not plug straight to the Patchbay, or you're going to end up with a lot of floor noise. They recommended that you would use something like the Cloud Lifter to help before you go to the Patchbay if you wanted to plug directly to the Patchbay, but just I like to be safe. I don't like any form of noise or floor noise or ground noise or whatever. So I go straight to my pre's, and from my pre's to my Patchbays. So as you guys can see right here, this is what the patch console looks like. So let's kind of make a scenario here. I have a microphone. That microphone is plugged into my Chandler LTD1, which is my Neve 1073. I have two of them, so I'm naming them 1 and 2. So I have a mic going to the unit, and in that unit I'm adjusting my mic gain, my line out, and I'm adjusting whether it's taking phantom power or not. And then here is the LTD out, which is the LTD. So this is the output from the LTD. So after the mic has been plugged in, so this is line out from the LTD. Then now I can choose where do I want to run it to. So let's say I want to run that, so we're talking mono signal here. I want to run it into the left side of my API compressor. And then, so this is for a fast attack compressor, and then I'm going to run it to my WA2A for just to get that warm tube compressor, which is slower attack. Then after that, I want to run it to, so I have the Prometheus EQ from West Audio, which is like their Pultec version of an EQ. And I really like it. I use it a lot. If I can't find it here, you can just type in here. And then here you go, shows right away. And then from that, I'm running it into my Neve tape saturation unit. And then from that, I'm gonna run it again into my SSL Fusion. And in this scenario, I'm gonna use in my Fusion unit just the high frequency compressor. And then now after this whole chain went, now I'm gonna need to plug it into some form of an input on my interface for conversion to convert from analog to digital, so it hit my DAW. In this scenario, I'm gonna run it, I have my Lynx Hilo unit, because I love the converters on these. They're mastering grade converters, incredible. So I don't only use it for mastering, I again use it also for recording because of the Patchbay. So here is my Hilo in left. All right, so now that shows you my chain. The mic went into my LTD1, which is the Neve 1073, came out to the API, to my warm audio, to my EQ, my tape, my SSL high frequency compressor, back into my converters, and this will show in my DAW. Okay, so the next thing is, let's say, so now you're doing a line check with your vocal, he's singing, and you want to see if you like running through the API or not. You can just command, press on this, bypass it on and off. That simple. Now you're listening without the API, now you're listening with the API. Same for the warm audio, any of them, which is amazing how you can just be able to bypass something really quick like this and see if you like it or not. And if you don't, you can just right click on it and then you can just remove it. Or here on hardware, you can replace it with something else. So that's the first advantage. Absolutely love that. For you to be able to do that with a normal analog Patchbay, I would have had to get down on my knees, unplug that cable, plug it to a different cable, and then plug multiple other cables back to it, and then come back to my desk, and then now I can listen to it without it. And then if I don't like it, I have to go back and do it. But this kind of really helps your ears on and off while you're still sitting in your perfect listening position in the sweet spot. Everything's good to go. So that's the first advantage I love about that. And the second advantage is those horizontal arrows right here that basically splits the signal for you. So if I press it right here, that means the mic hit my LTD1. My LTD1 is going down that arrow until it hits my helo, but it's also going sideways, being split. And in this scenario, I'm gonna put my helo right. So my second input on my helo here. What does that mean? That means I actually get to record that mic in two channels, in my Lynx helo left channel and my right channel. The left channel is getting the mic fully processed through the API and the compressor and then the EQ and then the tape and then the SSL. I'm fully processing this signal and printing it, but then I'm also grabbing a second copy of that signal that is completely raw and unprocessed, which is straight from my pre into my converters. Obviously this would be different. You can run it straight from your pre into a different EQ or into some form of another compressor that now I'm using my second. I have two of the 2A, so I'm using my second one, and on the settings of it, I will smash that one for power compression. So I have one that is gently compressed or barely compressed, and the other one is like very heavily compressed. Or I'm just, for the sake of it, I'm just grabbing a raw, unprocessed vocal chain, just in case one of these compressors hit a little too hard than I would like, and this is like my safe fail. If I somehow processed a little bit too much, so that means I don't like how it sounded, because obviously there's no going back with analog hardware units. So that's kind of what I would use it for. You can also split from any point from that chain. So right now I split starting from my pre, but I can also say I always want my pre, my API, and my WA2A. I want to split after my WA2A, and then I'll just put the helo right there. So that means I'm still recording two signals. The first one carries all of them. The second one carries my LTD, my API, and my WA2A, and that's it. And then at this point, after the WA2A, it's being printed into my right channel of my helo. I really like this a lot because it's just so much more flexible. Okay, now let's talk about mixing. How do you apply this? So this is kind of an example for tracking. Okay, so how do you apply this in mixing? I'm just gonna clear all right now. So I have a vocal track, and on that vocal track, I actually want to hybrid mix it. So I have a couple plugins, but then I want to send an insert out and coming back from Pro Tools IO inserts, which I'll do a separate video about that and how I set it up in my DAW. And then that insert from Pro Tools, is coming from my interface X8P out 1, and then it's going to come back into X8P input 1. There you go. And you see I set them far apart because I'm going to put a few things in between. And then I want to process that vocal using just my WA2A and my Neve. Here you go. And then you could do this again for your kick drum, and you could do this again for your bass guitar or whatever, depending on how much analog gear you want to process your stuff through. And then here's the cool thing is, this is now I set all of this up, and I'm going to just click on save. And then now in here, I can save this, call it, I'm going to call it here test mixing session. So now if I have everything cleared out and I'm opening that session and I'm trying to recall all my stuff, I can just go into here, and then I'm gonna find my test mixing session and just recall it. It recalls it for me. I do the same. I recall vocal chain for a specific artist that I recorded for, and like, okay, this is what I dialed down the tone for it, so I like it. Or a multi-tracking session for a full band. So I'll just recall the setting for this and then just bring everything back through the plugin, or whether it's a mixing session or a mastering session. So if I'm mastering and then In this mastering session, I used my API into my SSL, or I used the SSL into the API, or I used my EQ, my Pultec EQ into the API, into the SSL, and then I'm saving this for the specific mastering session or song that I'm working for, and then it's good to go. And then I just recall it really quick like this. It just makes my life so much easier, and more than just saving time, it gives me the access to all my analog unit to maximize. If I don't have the money to spend all that much money on analog unit that are dedicated for mixing and analog unit that are dedicated for tracking, now I have the same unit I can use when I'm mixing, and I can use the same unit when I'm tracking, and it's just a click of a button on the Flock Audio Patchbay, and then boom, here you go. You got your, you got basically the most money for your analog gear units, and then you can just utilize them to its maximum potential for your studio. I hope that really helped you guys, and if you have any notes or comments, make sure you comment below, and then if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next video.